Volodymyr Zelensky, from comedian to dictator. The inevitable fall. Donald Trump destroys him. Europe down for the count. It took Donald Trump speaking out for the world to finally open its eyes. Volodymyr Zelensky is a dictator. I've been repeating it for months, but as long as Western media glorified their little hero in a khaki t-shirt, public opinion refused to acknowledge the obvious. Today, even Donald Trump is saying it loud and clear. Volodymyr Zelensky refuses to hold elections, and continues his tragicomic performance, while his country lies in ruins. What do you call a leader who cancels elections under the pretext of war, and clings to power without the consent of his people? A dictator, nothing more.
Modestly successful comedian, President Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won, that never had to start and never would have started if I was president. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money that we sent them is missing. They don't know where the money is, he said. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's a dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction.
This is the truth that the media desperately tries to hide beneath torrents of pro-Ukrainian propaganda. Donald Trump pointed out what is glaringly obvious: Volodymyr Zelensky is plummeting in the polls, and for good reason. His country is in shambles, millions of Ukrainians have fled, the economy is bled dry, yet he keeps touring Western capitals, hand outstretched. Besides begging for billions, what has he actually achieved? Nothing but a ridiculous puppet show, relayed by European mainstream media. This modestly famous comedian, as Donald Trump calls him, led Ukraine into a war that should never have happened. Negotiations were possible. Accepting geopolitical realities and acknowledging Russia's red lines could have spared countless lives. But no, Volodymyr Zelensky chose to play the counterfeit hero, manipulated by his NATO puppeteers, who were eager to turn Ukraine into a battlefield against Moscow. The result? Cities turned into rubble, millions of dead, and a country with no future. Yet the comedian from Kiev continues his one-man show. Donald Trump said it. Zelensky played Joe Biden like a violin. Biden, too busy mumbling through incoherent speeches, kept sending billions to Kiev while Ukraine collapsed. But why would Zelensky want to end the war? He knew perfectly well that his business model was victimhood. The longer the war dragged on, the more the money flowed. Meanwhile, Europe is bankrupting itself to finance a conflict that was lost from the start, and the Ukrainian population suffers the consequences of Volodymyr Zelensky's suicidal strategy as he fantasizes about being a modern-day Churchill. But lost in his cinematic delusions, he forgot one thing: reality always catches up with fiction.
Et donc ce que je vais faire, c'est je vais lui dire, au fond, tu peux pas être faible face au président Poutine. C'est pas toi, c'est pas ta marque de fabrique. C'est pas ton intérêt. Comment ensuite être crédible face à la Chine si tu es faible face à Poutine? La deuxième chose, je vais lui dire, si tu laisses l'Ukraine prise, la Russie, elle sera inarrêtable pour les Européens, pour tous. Mais elle sera non seulement encore plus forte, elle continue d'investir, mais elle va récupérer l'Ukraine et son armée, qui est une des plus grandes d'Europe, avec tous nos équipements, y compris les équipements américains. C'est une faute stratégique énorme.
And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad.
The hour of truth has arrived. Russia is negotiating with the United States. Donald Trump is ready to resume dialogue with Putin, and Volodymyr Zelensky finds himself excluded from the discussions. Ukraine carries no weight anymore, and neither does its puppet president. Zelensky thought he could impose his conditions, but he now represents nothing more than an embarrassment to his allies. The war is turning against him, and the time for illusions is over. The masks are falling, and soon, history will remember Volodymyr Zelensky not as a hero, but as a tragic comedian who sacrificed his people for a role he was never fit to play.
And horrible situation, and that could evolve into a third world war. We're not going to let that happen. What a mess. What a horrible, bloody mess. Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Our focus is on achieving a ceasefire as soon as possible and ultimately a permanent peace. I'm also pleased that President Macron agrees that the cost and burden of securing the peace must be borne by the nations of Europe, not alone by the United States. And Europe must take that central role in assuring long-term security of Ukraine. And I believe strongly that it's in the best interest of the United States, the best interest in Europe, the best interest of Ukraine, and indeed the best interest of Russia to stop the killing now and bring the world to peace.
We want peace. This peace cannot mean the capitulation of Ukraine. This peace cannot be a ceasefire without guarantees. This peace must provide for the conditions of Ukrainian sovereignty. And it is a peace in which we must take our responsibilities, to maintain in the long term, security and stability for Ukraine, and for the entire region. And for our Europeans, it is an existential question. I believe that no one in this room wants to live in a world where the law of the strongest can be imposed, and where internationally recognized borders can be, from one day to the next, violated by anyone. Chris Yapi does not lie. Find Chris Yapi on his 2 YouTube channels, his Rumble channel, his TikTok, X, Instagram, VK and Threads accounts.